Welcome to Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. I'm Lori Falk, and together with my three powerhouse co-hosts and a slew of thought leaders and luminaries, we're bringing you a scintillating talk show style podcast that will disrupt the worlds of wealth and wellness as we know them today. We invite you to go on this journey with us as we offer you a paradigm shift that empowers you to change your approach to these key areas of your life. Join us and discover the truth that the future of wealth and wellness begins with you. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another exciting episode of Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. Boy, do we have an interesting topic for you today. The title of it is Your Life, Their Choice. Will your family honor your medical wishes? Now, in a typical scenario with the average person where everybody believes in the same medical model, that being the conventional medical model, where the doctors tell you what to do and you do it, that's fine to have your family as your medical power of attorney. But here's something that has come across my radar screen multiple times in the last 2 years, watching people, friends, colleagues, relatives, actually have medical emergencies, whether it's a stroke or some type of a disease that they have acquired. And it matters who your medical power of attorney is if you have different viewpoints than your family. Now, I know this for a fact. I actually, my sister and I get along beautifully, but she's very conventional and I'm very holistic. So think about this. On any given day, I use my Healy. Yep, this beautiful little biofeedback device. I take my redox signaling molecules. I use my LifeWave stem cell patches. I eat an organic diet. I have certain supplements that I take to ensure that my body is functioning in a healthy way. I mean, you can't stop the aging process, but you can make sure you're healthy and full of energy as you get older by doing all these types of things. Now, hypothetically speaking, if something were to happen, who would know that? Who would know what my wishes were? My sister, bless her soul, would not, because that's not her world. It's not her paradigm, and that's okay. So but how this came up for me is several years ago, I was at the doctor, a new doctor, and they asked me who my ICE was, my in case of emergency. And as a single woman, I didn't know what to do, and I burst into tears. Yep, did that girly thing. And then I called my girlfriend afterwards, the one that I call whenever I have a health concern or challenge. And I said, blah, 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 cried, told her the story. And she said, well, just put me down, which got me to thinking, just put her down as the ICE. Let's take that a step farther. As I started to witness what was going on in the lives of some people around me, I decided that I needed to take it a step further and make her my official medical power of attorney and financial power of attorney so that she had the capacity, the funds to support what we would want as the treatments, and the ability to make the decisions on my behalf. Because if I'm going to call her when I'm in with all my capabilities, why then wouldn't I want her to be the one making the decisions, right?
And Lori, I am so grateful that you raised this, because you did share this with us recently, and we decided that this episode needed to be shared more widely, because to me, it was like a wake-up call that what you're saying right now that you're saying it, is very obvious. But I have to say, I never thought about that before. And yeah, and I'm going to say, in the community of those of us that are very invested in wellness, and you've described, a lot of your choices, that are all biohacking, choices of, within our world, we're probably healthier than the rest of the population because of the things that we do. And speaking for myself, this is maybe a little bit of a confession. Maybe you're in a little bit of denial about things that could go wrong. But, the reality is anybody could be hit by a bus, no matter what their wellness practices or views are. And really anything could be happening to anyone. And we've been sharing, and I know that we're planning to today, some things for people to be thinking about and some really simple steps to take to make sure that our wishes are at least known. So
Yeah.
I am so grateful that you raised this, and we're all in a learning, I think, with our audience of like, gee, we never thought about this before.
And I don't know that many people ever do think about it. It was an unusual situation that made me think about it. But part of what prompted it was a colleague of mine who I've known for 8 years passed away last week. And for the last several years, we have all witnessed her declining health. And so I'm involved with ASEA, which is a company that produces a supplement that contains redox signaling molecules. These are the most incredible molecules. They tell your cells what to do with everything else. It's like these expensive phones don't work if they don't have the cell signal, if they're not within the range of a tower. Well, your body, if it doesn't have enough signaling molecules, doesn't work effectively either. So here we have this woman who was very high up in this organization, and she got sick. And part of it was dementia, and that meant that her mental faculties weren't 100%. So she was leaning more and more and more upon her daughter. Okay. And her daughter was totally conventional medicine. So we witnessed what happened when she went off of all of her holistic treatments, including her redox signaling molecules, and her health declined terribly. She suffered in ways she probably wouldn't have had to had she continued on the path. But the person in charge didn't have her same viewpoint. So the moral of the story is you need to make sure whoever is going to be responsible for your health, if anything happens where you can't make the decisions, that person is going to know what your wishes would be and they'll know what to do. I mean, that's the other key. Not just that they'll know what you would want, but how to do that, right? What kind of treatments, what kind of protocols. So I picked my friend, Mary, who's my go-to person to discuss all of these things with anyway. So I think it's something that every single person needs to really consider.
Yeah,
And I
absolutely.
think,
And
go ahead, please.
and I think it, it falls into, doesn't it, one of those topics, like with money, like with death, we don't want to talk about ill health. What happens as we get older? What happens if we develop a disease that has a certain set of symptoms because we feel we could be jinxing it if we talk about it. But actually, if we don't talk about what to do when we fall ill, when certain illnesses become apparent, then we're actually making it a lot harder on our relatives, because most relatives will want to do what you want them to do. But if they don't know what you want them to do, then all they can do is fall back on their own resources, their own what I would do in this situation. And that might go totally against what you would really want them to do if you spoke to them in advance of any of these things happening. And it isn't about jinxing anything and inviting unwellness into your life. It's about communication and ensuring everybody is on the same page and you're making it easier for them. And when you are in a relationship, it can be very easy to make an assumption that the other person knows what you want. But equally, if you're not in a relationship, it's even more imperative that you do exactly as you did, Lori, and you think about, well, if I am in this situation, who is going to advocate for me? Because again, as women, I think we're great at advocating for other people. We're not so good at advocating for ourselves. And therefore, let's make it easier for those to help us by helping them.
I think that's exactly it, Leslie. And it's, we talk about prevention is the best medicine. This is just another form of prevention, right? It's just putting, little things in place to kind of reassure yourself and your loved ones who, if something did happen, they would be emotional. I mean, there's all kinds of things that are going on. And I did want to bring up, because this was a very new topic for me. I have never thought about it in this way. I have thought about a will because of my children, and I know there's a difference between what we call a will, which is to just dividing assets and that kind of thing, to do with more of the financial side. But a living will is something that you create that is to help people decide what to do in the case that you are incapacitated. However, if you do dig a little bit, that can go out the window if doctors deem, whatever it is that you're wishing to be, not effective. So they don't technically have to follow that. So this, there's a lot of loopholes in that way. So we're talking about things that we would do for ourselves that are not something that you could just approach a doctor and, oh yeah, frequency medicine will do that for it. That's, so you have to, so what we're saying is to actually name someone as your advocate, right? And not just rely on a living will, your written wishes, but actually have someone that that is going to cover that for you.
Right. Absolutely.
It occurs to me that in addition to specifying what we want, we probably need to also specify things we don't want. Now, some of that is already in place. Leslie, I'm curious what it's like in the UK, but here there is something called a DNR, do not resuscitate, that people do get to elect, don't do anything heroic, and that is a choice that the individual makes for themselves. But as you know, I lost my mother to pancreatic cancer about a year and a half ago. And I come from a very medical family. You all know what my views are. I, of course, was here to support whatever her views were. And I was incredibly relieved that she was adamant that she didn't want any conventional treatment at her age. And her oncologist actually agreed, said, quality of life at this point is probably more important, than anything else. And she was in full faculty, and nobody else in the family argued with her or tried to persuade her to do anything else. And I was the one that was here with her to implement everything. And she said to me, I don't ever want to go back to the hospital. And I said, done. And she never went back to a hospital. And I was in a position to execute that. But I know of families, unfortunately, where, as I think one of you just mentioned, it gets emotional. And I know of one very, very heartbreaking case of an older woman who was very holistic, blah, 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 and would never have agreed to chemotherapy and radiation. And her children did it anyway. And so she died a horrible death. And that's one of the things I think we want to make sure doesn't happen, or to raise some awareness of that possibility and to take whatever steps we're able to not allow that to happen.
Right. And I'm going to give you another scenario. I mean, this is, we don't like to think about these things, but putting your head in the sand isn't going to mean that these things can't happen.
No.
So just have these as an awareness. So I have another friend who a couple of years ago asked one of our friends to be her medical power of attorney, because she knew that she would make the right, appropriate, holistic choices. Now, the problem in this scenario is that she had a stroke that was pretty severe. And to this day, a year plus later, she still can't speak. So she's pretty much nonverbal. You can communicate with her. My friend developed a way that she was able to. But okay, you have a woman who totally organic, biohacked everything. She had a PEMF mat. She had a biomat. She had a couple of Heelys. She was using redox molecules. She was doing stem cell activation patches. She was doing everything. Now she's got the stroke. She can't walk very well. She can't talk. She ends up in a assisted living facility. Now what? Now every shift you got a different person coming in. How are you going to get them trained how to use that biomat, how to use that Beamer PEMF device, how to give her the redox molecules? So my girlfriend ended up being there almost every day for about 9 months until she finally said, I can't do this anymore. I just can't, because it was starting to consume so much of her own life. So there's a scenario, and single people, right? So this is a single woman as well. Single people, I think maybe there's a bigger gap to think about, because you're not just going to go home to your spouse or your significant other. So who would take you in? Who would take you into their home and assist you so that you're not in that environment? I mean, she goes from eating organic meals to, I'm sorry, Chef Boyardee spaghetti and Jello. Hello. I mean, just the stories, I went on and on and on. So these are really important things to consider, because the traditional assisted living centers, nursing homes, call them what you may, are not holistic.
Quite the opposite. And the reality of those is worse even than you're describing,
Yes.
because they're businesses that are run for efficiency. And it's a bit off topic, but a very unfortunate situation. And, when you were speaking, I just kind of got this vision in the new evolved world that we are seeking to create, that there will be alternative options for people as we age, where all of this stuff is available in some places.
I would love to
And-
hear from, if there's anyone out there that listens to us, if you're, a nurse practitioner, or you work in these kinds of assisted living facilities, I would love to know your perspective on this, and
Yes.
if you've encountered anyone who, has requested something that was a little bit out there versus what, the traditional pain meds. Because I have heard that they don't have to give you, if you do have wishes to not do pain meds, or not do pharmaceuticals, they're more than willing to not do that. But I've never heard of them being willing to do something more
Else.
what we consider alternative. So yeah,
Can
if
I
you could join us on Facebook and let us know.
Absolutely. And can I give you a really live personal example of a conversation we had to have going back to maybe 3 years ago now. My mum-in-law ended up with dementia. She'd already signed her legal power of attorney and medical power of attorney just in time. And what I mean by that is you have to be of a certain mental capacity in order to be able to sign those two documents. So that you know what you are doing. She signed those just in time before her dementia was of a level where she wouldn't have been able to sign them, essentially. She went into a care home. She'd made it very clear before she went into the care home and before her dementia had advanced that should she be in a situation where she needed to be resuscitated, she didn't want to be resuscitated. So we knew that. She made a decision in the care home to stop eating and to stop drinking. And the medic said to us, you have a choice. We can force your mum to eat and drink that by admitting her to hospital. She'd have to be admitted to hospital. We can force her to eat and drink and get her back to a state of, inverted commas, wellness, where she could come back home, come back into the home, the care home again. But it's very likely that she would go through the same process of refusing to eat, refusing to drink. That's part of a dementia process, apparently, because it's almost the last decisions they can make for themselves. So my husband and his brother had to come to a really hard decision. Their heart was get her into hospital, force feed her, force hydrate her, return her back to the home, start the process again, basically, or to essentially follow her wishes, which were do not resuscitate, even though she was putting herself into that state of essentially requiring resuscitation. That decision was made far easier for my husband and brother-in-law because their mum had spoken to them prior to going into the care home with regards to what she wanted to happen. If she hadn't have had that conversation, then their heart would have absolutely taken over. Instead, they followed their mum's wishes. She made it clear what she would want to happen in a situation where she was incapacitated. And sadly, she passed away. But she passed away with dignity rather than going into hospital, be force-fed, force-hydrated, go back home into the care home and start the process all over again.
Leslie, thank you for sharing that story. That really puts a face on all of this.
Absolutely.
And I think
Yeah.
to the point that was made here, I think you made it, about making it easier for the family, making it easier for the people who care about you to make the tough decisions. That really brought it home for me of what a good deed that is.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of something else that since we're on this topic, I'm going to share. Because I didn't know that there was a potential legal problem. So I am going to mention this. My mother was ill, and we had made arrangements for potential in-home hospice care. She was never going to be moved to a hospice, but they would, be providing things. And fortunately, she didn't decline very much. And it was only till the day before she passed that we called hospice to request a care package and, pain meds. And then she went very quickly, mercifully just checked out and left. And what I found out afterward was that it was a really good thing that hospice had been called the day before. Because if she had passed at home without their stamp, I would have been investigated for murder. So you just reminded me about that. And again, not to create more alarm here, but just to add to this conversation that there's a lot of implications to some of these things that most of us haven't had to think about. And for the purpose of completeness of, covering this topic today, I just wanted to mention that again, in the context of any of these decisions of our own protection legally for some of the choices that we might make. And Lori, I know we again, disclaimer here, none of us are attorneys. We're not offering legal advice. However, I think there was just a little bit of research that we can share and maybe the names of some documents that our members of the audience might want to explore for themselves before we, wrap all this up.
Oh, I essentially called my attorney, got a medical power of attorney form. It was a standard form. And I got a financial power of attorney form, another standard form. And not only do they need to be signed by yourself and whoever you are assigning these titles to, but you have to get these forms notarized. There's a living will. I hadn't gone down that path. Actually, now that we're having this more detailed conversation and given this recent situation with this colleague of mine, something I might consider as well, because, the fact of the matter is we spend an enormous amount of time learning about all these biohacking tools, all of these incredible holistic ways of supporting our health, right? Because we want to be healthy and vitally alive. And we're doing it really to stay healthy. But things happen. And it's the when things happen, then what? I mean, for heaven's sakes, if you're doing all of this to support your body, mind, soul, whatever, on a day in, day out basis, wouldn't you, of course, then want to be using these same types of modalities going forward when you're in dire need? And it's not going to happen unless you take the initiative to ensure that it happens. Because at this moment in time, the way the medical system is set up, especially in the United States, you'll be at the mercy of the doctors.
Yeah.
That wouldn't be where I would want to be.
Nope. And the things that we're describing today, other than the emotional dimension, they're really not difficult. None of this is onerous. These are relatively simple steps to take that just require some intention and a little bit of execution. But I was just tuning in a few minutes ago and thinking that I've really gotten a lot of education out of this conversation. There are things that I'm going to do. I hope that there are others, that are listening to this that also recognize the importance of this. And I like to think that there are people whose quality of lives will be enhanced by the ripple effect of us speaking up about this. Because Lori, I think you were looking around and you couldn't find this conversation on any platform or any other podcast or anywhere. So you heard it here first, perhaps.
And I consider this next level holistic care, right? Because we're doing everything else. We've researched, we've studied, we've, worked with naturopaths, we've done our own studies, we've followed the cutting edge science, we're on top of it. Well, let's make sure that someone's going to be on top of it if we aren't in a position to be.
Absolutely.
Well said.
I wanted to say, I think it's easy to form community around the tough subjects, and that's really what we're here for, is to kind of bring up these topics that you might not want to bring up to a loved one. And so this maybe is your sign to talk to your parent or your child or something about these issues or topics and what they might want as their wishes, because it could open up a whole world of other conversation as well.
Actually, Jenny, to your point, and you just gave me this idea, there may be people in your life, and perhaps even the people that you might reach out to that are sympathetic, that you might want to share this episode with as the background for the conversation that you want to have. And there may be friends that you have that would benefit from hearing about this because they feel the way you do and haven't thought it out. So feel free to share this. I think we raised some really important things here today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Any other points, ladies, or are we good for today?
We're good for today. Over to you.
I'm good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you everyone for joining us for another episode of Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed. We are so grateful for our listening audience, and we look forward to meeting with you again next week. Thank you so much for joining us today on Women's Wealth and Wellness Unleashed, where we empower women to take control of the two most important areas of their life, their health and their wealth. If you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with another amazing woman who's ready to elevate her wealth and wellness journey. Stay connected with us by heading to our website and joining our Facebook community. All the details can be found in the show notes. Until next time, keep thriving and unleashing your highest potential.